There's a hidden reason most people fail to start, and it's not what you think it is. You don't need to be the expert to be successful in business. As a matter of fact, people don't pay for expertise. They pay for accountability. If you want to guide people to a desired end result, you don't need to know more than 20% than they do. This comes from Jason Lee, who's a YouTuber I follow and really like. You're actually more adept very often if you're only a little ahead of somebody you're guiding than if you're way ahead of them, because you have context. You know where they just came from. My favorite story in the whole wide world comes from the world of Montessori. If you don't know this about me, I'm obsessed with Montessori education. I think Maria Montessori is one of the most brilliant humans who's ever lived. Her story is unbelievably compelling. She took street children in Italy and was able to teach them in a way that they outranked children being private school kids, because the Italian government at the time wouldn't let her train, children of value. One of the things that she discovered was what she calls the multi-age classroom. So Montessori doesn't have teachers, it has guides. These are just the adults making sure the kids don't set the room on fire, basically. And I know they do a little bit more than that. The children's education is, one, self-guided, and two, there's a strong emphasis on children teaching other children. That's why she likes a multi-age classroom. It comes in 3-year blocks. So the older kids in the classroom are teaching the younger kids. And this ends up being multifaceted. One, the older kids learn by teaching, which is really valuable, and they learn a lot more than they would if they were just learning all on their lonesome. But the younger kids learn more from the older kids than they would from a teacher, because the older children understand their context. They know what they would struggle with because they just did this. They just came from it. It's a symbiotic relationship where the older child actually develops faster by teaching the younger child, and the younger child develops faster because they're learning from someone who just came from where they are. And you know this in your own experience because you've watched videos from people that have made $100 million. And the advice that they give is disconnected from you, isn't it? Like, they don't have your context. They're out of touch with your reality. They say things that suddenly you're like, well, that's easy for you to say, dude. You have a massive amount of wealth, and I'm not necessarily in that position. So it's easier and better for you to start following people that are closer to where you are, just ahead. If you're climbing a mountain and you want somebody to help you climb this mountain, you want somebody who's thousands of feet ahead of you that you can just look at and kind of see where it is that they're stepping, or somebody that's 2 or 3 hand rungs ahead of you that can actually reach a hand down and grab you and pull you up. The same is true in reverse. So if you want to start a business, if you want to start coaching, if you want to start being a thought leader, if you want to start being an educator, if you want to start building authority, you don't have to be the expert. Be the guide. As long as you know 20% more than I do, which, by the way, generally takes a day, especially with some of what's coming out in the world right now. In the world of AI, if you've been spending 6 hours on an AI tool today, you're ahead of most of the world because so much has changed since yesterday. So you don't need to be the expert. You don't have to know everything. The other thing that I think is really interesting is my favorite words are, I don't know. I don't know. As long as you follow them up with, I'll find out. Because remember, people aren't paying for expertise. They're paying for accountability. They're paying for somebody who's smart enough and proactive enough to go solve the problem, not necessarily know exactly how to solve the problem right then and there. You can start whatever it is that you want to start right out of the gate. Just be really honest about where you are. You're going to find that that resonates with your viewer and your listener, subscriber, or your customer more than anything else. It's like, hey, I'm 20% further along than you. And if that's valuable to you, here's what it is that I can do. Here's the service I can provide. Here's the education that I have. Here's the information that I have. And we're going to go on this journey together. As I'm saying that, I hope that resonates with you. Here's the thing. If that weren't true, there would be no reason for any of us to create anything. Alex Hormozi has more than 10 times the amount of money I have. So why would I create content? Why wouldn't you go just watch Hormozi? And if that's true, Charlie Munger has 150 times the amount of money Alex has. So why would we watch Alex? Why don't we just watch Charlie? It would put us all in a position where there's just one voice, one authority, one thought, one approach. Where you are right now, wherever that happens to be, is immensely valuable to a person who's 2 steps behind you, because those 2 steps are hard. And what's really interesting, and what you're going to hear from everybody that's ever built a business, made money, scaled, sold, it gets easier as we go. And that's really worth meditating on. It was harder for me to amass $10,000 in savings than it was to make 100 grand. It's harder to make 100 grand than it was to make $1 million. It's harder to make $1 million than it was to make 10. It gets easier, which means that where you are now is actually harder than where I am. You're going through harder steps. And by the way, I made my money 2 years ago is when I made my exit. The whole world has changed. So the context that I'm approaching from is antiquated. The information that I have for people is antiquated. The things that I have to teach you are antiquated. So as you accomplish the steps that I took 2 years ago, you're actually a better authority than I am. You're a more believable authority because you've done it more recently. So if you're building a business, your content is more valuable than my content, because I'm a decamillionaire building a business from an entirely different paradigm. I have resources, I have employees, I have a staffing agency, I have a name, I have authority, I have a following, albeit small. I get to do and draw from success pillars other people don't have. So should those people be listening to me, where my success really at this point is artificially inseminated? Every business I build from this point on is artificially inseminated, even if I don't start with any money. Or should they be listening to you? Because you're doing it now. You're doing it in the moment. You're doing it in this new ecosystem. I didn't have to contend with AI. I didn't have to contend with private equity groups in the agency space. I didn't have to contend with offshore labor that was wildly adept. I didn't have to contend with any of that. So I'm not a believable party, right? But what am I? I'm arrogant enough to put my voice out into the ecosystem and hope that it lands. I shouldn't even say that. I should be a little more forgiving. The word isn't arrogant, because I don't want to call you arrogant when you choose to do it. Maybe the word is brave, right? Like maybe it's just, hey, step out and say, hey, I figured out how to do this little thing. Where we get into imposter syndrome is where we try to pretend that we've done more than we really have. I have exited a business for 8 figures. I've never built a business to 8 figures in revenue. I don't know how. I got close. I had a business that was doing 6 and change, close to 7, and then I sold it because the wheels started to come off for me. I ran into all these problems that I didn't know how to address. And what's funny about that is I'm in a mastermind right now for 8-figure entrepreneurs. And I snuck my way in because I had an 8-figure exit. I've never built an 8-figure business from a revenue perspective. I don't know how. I want to. I'm going to. I plan on doing that. But for me to step in and say like, oh, here's how you do 7, 8, 9 figures. Well, how would I know? I try not to weave that into my narrative. What I approach people with is, here's what I have done. Here's what I know how to do. And here's where and how I can help you. And by the way, I'm still learning. Right? I'm still on the way. And so I'd love to learn how to build an 8-figure revenue business. I'd actually love from you, if drop it in the comments, who's built real 8-figure revenue businesses that I should be following, that we should all be following, because that's viable information. There's a person who I'm friends with, so I'm not going to bash him. He sold his business close to 20 years ago. He's still one of the biggest authorities in the space. And what's really interesting, and he talks about this behind closed doors, he's like, nothing I say really. He's still selling coaching, consulting, courses, training, masterminds. The business he built 20 years ago wouldn't survive today. And he never went back into the fray. He never went back out on the battlefield. He didn't continue to do it. So how could his advice really apply? But he has the name, he has the pedigree, he has the authority, everybody knows him. So he's able to, keep basically drawing from that well. You have experience. You have experience with recency. It's relevant. Don't think you need to be the expert. Don't think you need to solve all the problems. Don't tell people you've solved problems that you haven't, because that's a great way to get found out and generate some really mean YouTube comments. But the problems that you've solved up to this point, they're valuable. They're immensely valuable. Every step you take is valuable to somebody who's 2 steps behind you. I hope this was valuable to you. I hope you start creating content. I hope you start building authority. I think that's going to be one of the only things left to us in the world of AI. So start now, today. Start poorly. Do it bad. Just commit. I'm going to put something up and I'm going to see where it happens. And as long as I'm being authentic, trying to provide value, trying to help other people, what happens next is the ideal outcome. I hope this was helpful to you. If you want to help me share my content, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.